What's up, everybody? Today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to just kind of talk about Bento Box and our new Guardian Cube Boombox, just to talk about and try and sell the format to people, because I think these sorts of two-player draft boxes are a great idea, and I think people should play them more. So, yeah, me and Oliver are just going to go through our current two boxes and talk about our experience with them, as well as how to build your own later on. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, you can continue listening. That's hopefully why you clicked on this video in the first place. So just a quick introduction. So in case you haven't realized by some of our random videos, I assume not many people watch all of our videos, so but we have a couple of two-player cubes called respectively Bento Box and Boom Box. What these boxes are basically they're 90 card mini cubes. If you don't know what a cube is, it's basically just a set of cards that you use for exclusively drafting. If you like limited formats, and if you want to play different types of limited formats, we highly recommend looking at the cubes. Tyler Loose, that's his name, made a cube site that has lists of various cubes. You can use that, or you can find people talking about their cubes in various forums. We don't really have a centralized hub to talk about them, so I'm kind of using our channel as a springboard for that. So yeah, Bento Box 90 card set of cards. These are for two players. You can make two of them to make a format for 4 players, but generally we try to keep it for 2 players. So if you want a draft-like experience, but you don't have 8 people in your area to string together and put in the room together at one time, this is a great way to get limited style practice without necessarily needing to grab a booster box and or 7 other friends. You only need 1.
That's a lot of friends I don't need.
I know, right? I'm the one who, I won't say I came up with it, because it's just a 2-player cube. It's been done before in Magic, and I had the idea to do it last year, just on a whim, because I thought it would be a great way to experience a mirror match cube that's specifically built for it. We first built the Bento Box because I wanted to build Ninja, because I thought about Flick Flack and how Flick Flack basically countered Ninja's main gimmick by being itself. And I thought, well, it'll be interesting to see in a draft format with a bunch of cards that are like Flick Flack or can counter Flick Flack and all that. See how that works out and see if it can create interesting gameplay.
Wait, you're not gonna mention the fact that you're drunk and thought Bento Box was a funny pun?
No. Well, it is a funny pun. So thank you, Oliver. So the next morning, I woke up and told Oliver, "Make this for me."
Huh.
Let's talk about Bento Box. We made the Bento Box, and it's been we've been bringing it along to events pretty often. After testing it out a bit, main gimmick there: Ninja Mirror, Katsunaira. You have 3 main archetypes of draft, which is mid-range ninja / control ninja, aggro combo ninja, and crouching tiger combo ninja. Do you want to talk about your experiences with Bento Box, Oliver?
Yeah, so we have played this with like a ton of our friends. It's been very critically acclaimed between like our friend groups. So I played
It feels
it with
weird to say that. It feels kind of arrogant, but yeah, it's been pretty well received.
Yeah, so I played it with people like Yuki Lee Bender. I played it with like Zane Johnson, Nia Tran, Eric from Sparker Genius. I've also lent it to other people. So like at Barcelona we let it Pudding and Kaiser play it from Blue Pitch, and they really loved it. And you can pretty much find all the links in the description. Yichin did write an article about it on Reddit a while ago, and you can find the spreadsheets in the description as well. I tried selling this idea to James White back in Baltimore, and I hounded him again at Barcelona, and he was like, "If you want to talk to someone about cubing, you should talk to that guy." And then he pointed to Chris Gehring. So I hounded Chris Gehring for a bit until he finally had enough time to play a game with me, and he really enjoyed it. So yeah, we did a Winston draft, and then I beat him. So that's my claim to fame. I beat a dev at my at a game of our own design.
Yeah. Well, their design. They designed it. We made a variant of it.
Yeah, it's funny because like when I was playing Chris Gehring, he was like, "I don't remember what half these cards do," and I was like, "Didn't you design these cards?" But yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Awesome.
so the formats that we have are listed here. It's not limited to this. Is what we've tested and played, and you can find the videos on our channel. So to play Duplicate Sealed, you need actually 2 copies of this, which requires 180 cards. 4 players, you require 180 cards. For everything else, all the other 2-player draft stuff, you require 90 cards. The way I started to design this was I took decks that I like regular Blitz decks, and then I just like counted the ratios, what cards I wanted to see in them, and then I just copied that over and made a spreadsheet, and then that's pretty much how I determined the pitch or the number of cards in each pitch. So you usually want to see like 10 to 12 blues in or sorry, like 10 to 14 blues in like a blitz deck. That's 40 cards. Since this is a cube where every single card can be played in both heroes, we limited the max deck size to 35. So then I just you just do the math. Usually like 10-ish blues for each of the heroes or for each of the decks if you want to like run 30 to 35. So that's pretty much what I set the basis for the 3 pitch cards, and then I went through and added cards that I thought would only be good or be very biased towards Katsu, and then some cards that would be very biased towards Ira. So obviously Ira likes to do Kadachi threat, right? Like 1, 2, 5 or something. So like Torrent Tempo is probably more attractive to Ira than Katsu. And then Katsu obviously wants the certain strikes. You need to have the Lord of Winds. We put 3 of them in because otherwise Mugenshi wouldn't really do a lot. Yeah, and then Ira likes to have the 2-4-6s, so you can do Kodachi 2-for-7. And so yeah, that's pretty much how I split it up. And then eventually we refined the lists over and over again until we found a spot where it was comfortable and it felt good to play.
Yeah. So basically, like, if you want to start building like these sorts of dueling cubes, best way to do it is just make a couple decks of like archetypes that you're interested in, find overlap between those decks, and then just get the ratios right, and then mash them all together, and like remove extraneous stuff that you don't really need. It says it sounds like pretty haphazard, and honestly, that's what it was. One thing I like about Fab is that you can pretty much like, as long as you have like a coherent idea of what you're doing in Fab, the game feels pretty good to play. So as long as you come in with 3 coherent ideas for decks, you can kind of round out the edges of each limited format and find each like 2-player limited format and find ways to like make them mesh together, make them work together, and then you'll have a very coherent and interesting draft experience.
Yeah. So yeah, some things that we changed was like or changed for this cube compared to like normal Fab play is like we made Mask of Many Faces a token. You've seen us do that in Midwinter Cube, where we had like Northern Robe as a token. So obviously, to make things work, you can change the rules as needed.
Yeah, and I think what Mask of Many Faces as a token was one of the first things we settled on, only because outsiders really showed off how interesting Mask of Many Faces could be when you like were able to use it for its effect. And so I felt like the gameplay would be very suitable for a Ninja Mirror, where you're not necessarily going to be able to draft your entire combo lines, but you can draft specific combo lines and you can use it for specific combos and to great effect. Like one of the pretty common uses of it is just to go Mask of Many Faces, naming whatever combos into Fine Center. Was it Rushing
Grand
River?
Dance.
Grand Dance, yeah. And then playing Fine Center.
Yeah. Attack with Go Again, naming Crane Dance, and then yeah, Fine Center at the end.
Yeah. It's it's got there's a lot of like nuanced lines like that where you can just like find ways to make the deck make your deck tick.
Yeah, yeah,
And
it's
that sort
very
of gameplay where you're trying to string together combos and cobble together combos from your draft pool is kind of what we focused on when we were designing and refining um, this cube. You can focus on other stuff if you want to make a cube of your own. Um, if you, as long as you have like an idea of like what kind of stuff you want to test, basically, right? So with ninjas, it's all about sequencing. And it's all about like it's mostly like ninjas mostly about sequencing and efficiency. So that's
yeah.
kind of what we emphasize. That was naturally emphasized here. That we made sure to emphasize.
Yep. Obviously, yeah, another reason why we had like masking phase as a token is like if you see it in drafting, that's an insta pick, honestly. So it helps alleviate some of that choice.
Yeah,
And then you'll see like some of our refinement like took out like very, very strong cards is because you want to see these cards in both the decks and doesn't really give for much interesting choice. So like 100 wins, you want to see it in pretty much every deck or both decks. So we just took those out. And then like that's like a few ways you can try and refine your list. And then obviously we had like Zephyr Needle as a token. We found it was too strong, so we put it back as a as a card that you want to draft. And then you can try and make the opponents you can try and draft all the defense reactions and then draft the Zephyr Needle, so your Zephyr Needle will never be broken. So there's just some choices that you can do while drafting, or some like conscious choices you can do while drafting and strats
yeah.
and stuff.
Basically, the idea is that if you have cards that are insta pick and enough of a power level where it warps the gameplay around it, you probably want to remove as many of those as possible, and you want to have as many like not quite insta picks, but very decent picks depending on the context. You want to maximize those as much as possible. For example, if you've been drafting mostly like generic stuff and you see flick flags, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be pretty good, but it's not gonna be as enticing as a person who's been drafted mostly combo cards and then sees a flick flag, right?
Yeah.
And so the idea of draft is basically you want to have competing tensions and you want different cards to mean different things to all players. So as that's kind of what you want to emphasize when you're picking cards. If you want to make a 2-player cube or honestly any cube, it's just that as long as you can see yourself drafting this card in multiple different decks for multiple different reasons, it's probably a pretty good card to include.
Yep. Yeah. If you can see, I've all the changes that we've done per version, I have written a little note about it. So, and yeah, I think this cube has been very successful, and everybody loves playing it.
Yeah. Personally, I actually don't like this as much as Guardian Cube, but maybe it's me not liking Ninja as much, but I do like Guardian Cube more. Um, it's I consider this like a good first experiment for sure. But and if you like Ninja, I'm not saying don't try it, but I you can definitely have preferences, and it's okay if you don't like it, or it's okay if you find it like boring or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, that's Bento Box. That's generally the idea we had with Bento Box. After I want to say like 6-8 months with Bento Box, I actually no, it was like 3 months after Bento Box. I was like, I told Oliver we should make a Guardian Cube, and he was like, no, and then he
Uh,
got mad at me because
so you wanted to make an 8-player Guardian Cube, and I said no.
no, it was Guardian and Runeblade.
Yes, I made it and I scrapped it.
Yeah, yeah, he didn't test it at all. He just like he just made a couple packs, and he's like, it seems boring. And
It
he
is
scrapped it.
boring.
Anyway, so later on we made a Guardian 2-player cube. Mostly because we Heavy Hitters was somewhat on the horizon, and it's kind of hyped to have a whole bunch of new cards injected into the cube, as well as like yeah, it was mostly also because of Heavy Hitters, right? I don't think there's any other reason for it.
Uh, So there, I made this because when I was building the Guardians of Runeblade cube, I was like, there's some interesting overlap between sorry, there's an interesting archetype where you can play with only shields, and we'll get to that I guess later. But yeah, that the Guardian and Runeblade cube turned into our Assassin and Runeblade cube, and then I took like a few hours just to make this one. Same templating as the what's it called, the Bento Box.
Yep.
Like you take a blitz deck, you count how many blues are in it, you find how many threats you want to put into it, you find the heroes, you find the archetypes, etc., etc. But yeah, for you can see for this one, our draft identities are Valda and Bravo. Heavy hitters added Betsy, and we have pretty much the same. Oops, that's not supposed to be there. We have the same rulings as the Bento Box, except for the duplicate sealed. We are this one, since like Guardians usually play the same. Mostly. We added the clause you cannot use cards that you've won with, so it makes it so you have to build an entirely different deck, and hopefully there's enough cards that makes it so the two decks that you've created are work much differently.
Yeah. So yeah, one of the things that we found out with different classes, right? One, you want to when you're making these sorts of cubes, you want to think about what makes the mirror match between these heroes interesting. For Ninja, it's mostly about sequencing, efficiency, and finding your combos before your opponent does, right? There's obviously definitely a lot of nuance to it. I don't want to belittle the Ninja mirror, but that's generally what these two-player cubes will test is similar to what the mirrors will test. In Guardian, it's all about forcing damage through, and then like naturally bringing your opponent to a checkmate position.
And then finding each and every, or like squeezing value out of each and every card is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure if we bring Alan Lube on this, he'll be able to talk more about this. But basically, that's the kind of idea we went in. The other thing is that Guardian archetypes are not super well defined. There's no like hard combo lines or anything. There's some small synergies, and there's definitely like Aura Guardian versus like Value Guardian versus like other Guardians. But many of their cards are many of the cards for like their optimal versions of the decks are pretty similar, especially among the attacks. So the hard part is, how do we make this an interesting format where you're creating interesting tensions between the cards that are archetype specific and general archetype good cards. So do you want to talk about the archetypes, Oliver?
Yeah, sure. So if our Ninja cube was go wide, this cube is go tall. So Valda, she actually has a hero ability that says anytime an opponent draws during their turn, you make a seismic surge. So there's a couple of cards that has card draw, like Blessing Deliverance and like Embolden. I don't think anyone's ever drawn from Embolden. But yeah.
So
we had some other cute stuff that we took out. So like Sifts used to be in here. And Potion of Luck used to be in here, but once Heavy Hitters came out, we cut all the cute stuff. So she's not as big of a choice to have, but she still works in the general skeleton. If that makes sense. Yeah, so all the Guardians love blocking. Blocking is very good in this cube. And then Bravo has like the Crush, Dominate, Aggro plan if you want to. Betsy has the Wager, Overpower plan if you want to. Then everybody always has Guardian Shenanigans.
Yeah. So yeah, this is one of the cubes where we actually like removed or de-emphasized a specific archetype when we added Betsy in, and we added a couple new archetypes. Honestly, when you're adding a new archetype to these sorts of like two-player cubes, it's not that hard. You'll need to change up the entire structure of the cube. Usually you change around like 10 to 15 cards, because when you design these cubes, most of the cards in these decks are going to be cards that you're fine playing in pretty much any deck, to varying degrees, obviously. And then only like 5 to 10% of the cube is going to be cards that are like only good in a specific archetype.
Yeah. We also wanted to make this cube. I don't think we mentioned it before, but we also wanted to make this cube because since Ninja is usually like really aggressive and goes fast, this one plays a lot slower, and then it really emphasizes you to have a good pitch stack.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah. Definitely, like in terms of fundamental skills, Guardian Cube is all about like pitch stacking, maximum efficiency, and figuring out ways to go over your opponent's humps.
Yeah. So, uh, obviously we have all the versions here as well. We have the changelog here. I will say, so since I was making the Guardians of Runeblade cube, the overlap or the archetype that I found was Shield Bash.
Yeah,
Shields matter. This is this is what makes the cube really really fun. Once you get down to those low life totals where Titan's Fist is coming in for 4, you're at like 1 or 2 life. You really have to play around the Shield Bash cards because they can kill.
yeah. I think like those sorts of like one life dances I mentioned before somewhere else on the podcast, but those sorts of like one life dances are like my favorite part of Flesh and Blood, and this makes it so that it's a 2 life or 3 life dance depending on how many shield bashes your opponent drafted or
Yep.
how many shield bashes you've counted so far,
And how much damage you want to take from this pummel, etc.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's an interesting format. I don't think we've ever had um, we've ever really had a fast game here, right? Like
We
we had a
have.
couple games that reached like the low health threshold pretty quick, but once people hit 5 life, it becomes like a 10 turn slog.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah,
There has been like some games where I played where it was with you where you were trying to go as aggressive as you could with
yeah,
Zealouses and Rouse, and I was just like, sure, I could just hit you for 11, dominate with Crippling Crush as well, and
yeah,
try and disrupt you. So
yep,
yeah, it does get it can get fast. Like there are ways of just like blowing out your opponent with like imposing visages. Imposing visage we have a ton of because there's a ton of auras. Yeah, imposing visage getting like what is it? Earthlore empowerment or something. Turn 0 and then just smack them down. That's a kind of a high roll. It doesn't really happen that often, but
yep,
yeah. Games don't always go to fatigue.
yeah. So yeah, that's kind of the general ideas behind our Guardian Cube. Um, and so part of what we wanted to do today is just talk about like what would we do if we were to make, or kind of walking people through the process, because I know this has been a pretty common question in the cube forums I've been lurking in, which is how do you start building a cube, and how do you like test and try it out and make sure that everything's balanced. What sorts of ratios do you have, so on and so forth. So like we said, starting with 3 blitz decks is a pretty good idea. And for 2-player draft cubes specifically, you want to be able to make sure that the gameplay between those blitz decks is at least somewhat interesting. For example, one thing that Oliver absolutely hates is the prism mirror.
Yep.
I think it's somewhat interesting. But if you don't find the prism mirror interesting, or you don't find the Dromai mirror interesting, you probably shouldn't build a Dromai cube. Same thing with other heroes or other classes where you just Phi mirror. You're basically just racing, right?
Yeah. Yep. That's why
Yeah,
Phi isn't in the cube. But also like I tried not to add talents because it doesn't allow for good pivoting.
yeah, that too. Yeah, you want to just eliminate as many like cards that are dead in certain archetypes as possible. This is something that's generally like a general thing in most cube design talk, which is make sure that there aren't any dead picks. I know for limited, that's almost normal retail limited. That's basically impossible because there's always going to be like bad cards in the set. There's always going to be like cards that are just like pretty much unplayable. Um, but for cube, you can control that. And you can make it so that you never have those polarizing moments where there's no real decision between picks.
Yeah. I will say like some of our friends have made variations of these cubes. One of our friends has made a Runeblade cube where it's just Briar and Chain. I
Mhm.
have played it, and the talents does not really work there. And
Yeah.
then it just becomes like a a 2-turn game. It's like who can pop off harder.
Yep.
So, I mean, it's fun for the person who's winning, I guess. But to me, I didn't really feel enjoyment in the game because like
Yeah.
I drafted these cards to play with. I only get to see like a quarter of my deck, not even.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah,
just
that's the
my
good thing about
opinion.
cube, right? You can just make your own
Yeah,
format where you can only play games you enjoy.
yeah. That's what I've made here. Like
Yeah.
obviously he likes his cube because he's made it He likes that kind of gameplay. I've told him my opinion. He can totally ignore me if he wants. He already knows my opinion. So
Yeah, Patrick.
yep.
Calling him out directly, if in case he's listening. Um, but yeah, so say you want to make a warrior cube, right? Um, the first thing that you want to do is just identify decks. So I will just go through a brainstorming process. We won't actually make this yet, maybe, but you can kind of
I was thinking of making a warrior one after heavy hitters.
yeah. But
Olympia is quite
we'll,
different from
we'll go through
Kasai.
like the basic brainstorming process, and then just like show people like what we generally do when we talk about stuff on our own. So, Oliver, warrior, what kind of decks do you come to mind when you think about warrior matchups?
I'm writing it down right now. Olympia, Kasai, Dorinthia. That's what I would put in. I
Okay,
wouldn't
cool.
put in Bolton because talents suck. That's just my
Yeah.
opinion. So Olympia is kind of wager focused.
Yep.
Kasai and Dorinthia are more weapon focused.
Yeah.
You can
Kasai has the
have
gold,
what's
so
up?
Kasai
Yeah,
has gold, so you can
Kasai
kind of
is
like.
gold. Dorinthia is more just like Dawnblade. But
Mhm.
so Kasai and Dorinthia has like, or I guess, sorry, Kasai and Olympia and Dorinthia, they all can use the one-hander stuff. Kasai more so.
Mhm.
Oh, we actually use two Kasais too, huh?
We'll just do one for now.
But which one? Anyways,
You,
Dorinthia is
you,
more.
you
Oops,
you
Dorinthia
decide.
is more about Dawnblade, and then we can have like attack actions. Because Olympia likes to wager, so those can be like the Olympia only cards, the attack action wagers. That because you really want to see that bias towards Olympia,
Mhm.
or you see those cards and you want to bias towards Olympia. Kasai, you see the one-handed stuff and you want to bias towards that. The pumps and the attack reactions, those are probably like all of them, but Dorinthia more so.
Yeah.
Um,
So we'll stop right here. I'll stop Oliver right here.
yeah,
So we have generally like what we kind of want to emphasize with the heroes, which is these specific archetypes for these specific heroes. That doesn't mean that they're the only archetypes for them, right? You can theoretically build two-handed Dory with like a Decimator Great Axe with attack actions, and be generally fine. And occasionally, the reason why you play Dory is because you have these various like again attacks that a lot more go again on weapon attacks than your actual attack actions. So that's what would be like one reason to play Dory if you wanted to do like Axe Dory. Or theoretically, right, you can play Olympia as hatchets focused and also focus on weapons, so on and so forth. So we have generally like a couple ideas of like where we might find overlap and where we might be able to pivot from one hero to another based off of how the draft is going. So in other words, put yourself in the drafter's shoes and then just be like, okay, well, if I'm drafting this and I realize that I'm getting cut off, what can I pivot to? So for example, if I'm drafting Dory stuff and I have like, oh, I have Song Pride, I have, let's just say, not Seal Blade Supremacy. We'll say like Iron Song Determination, right? Or some other like Dory cards.
say
Um,
Steelblade.
those are
Specializations and stuff.
specializations, though.
Yeah,
We can't say that.
I know, but it's easy.
Yeah, but yeah. So say we have like a decent amount of like two-handed reaction focused cards. What can we pivot to? And obviously, if you want to pivot to Olympia, and we know Olympia is relatively undrafted, or Olympia-like archetypes are relatively undrafted, we can be like, well, here are the cards that we're going to want to kind of bridge the gap between these two archetypes. So then you think, okay, what does Dory want, and what does Olympia want in this archetype? So, for example, Fatal Engagement, right? That's a pretty big thing.
Mm,
I guess
it's
maybe not
just
Fatal Engagement.
it's
Um,
not it's not important because it's only Olympia that's gonna be having attack actions. It's only
yeah,
you can only play it if you block an attack action. So
yeah. So probably not that then. Maybe like I don't know, Stroke of Foresight.
sure,
Stroke of Foresight's Kasai and Dory more like.
yeah,
Yeah. So we can say like, okay, well, if we want to include cards like Stroke of Foresight or cards that draw and put draw or discard or whatever like trade in, that could be used to bridge the gap between various heroes that care about either drawing or attack actions.
yeah,
And then you kind of just fill in the gaps. You just kind of like do this a lot and like look at blitz decks, look at other existing archetypes, look at what they are running, to fill out most of your list, and then just make sure that you have a somewhat coherent pitch ratio, which is just, I guess in Warrior you just want to keep the pitch ratios mostly even, right?
Yeah, I mean they mostly had the same amount of blues for each deck.
Yeah, same amount of blues, reds and yellows slightly emphasized, and yeah, so basically just go from there, right?
Yep. Yeah, it was a lot more. It was a lot more work to balance the number of blues for like Midwinter Cube or something because Wizards obviously want more blues than Rangers.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, so like once you have that basic framework, then you can just start testing. The good thing about two-player cubes is that you can just test with one person, and you can just get a lot of data just by playing with one person. Obviously, it will be tailored to your playstyles, but that's fine. That's the whole point of this. So,
yeah,
basically, like all you need to do to start off with cube building is just get a framework down and get some big ideas going. Once you have those big ideas, then you can work. Then you can just like put it to test, and then see if the gameplay is interesting. See what needs to be done for it. Talk with bounce some ideas off of people, and then you can arrive at just keep on iterating, and then you'll eventually arrive at something good for you at least.
yeah. And then one thing to think about is like if this is like too much, if you can't really fit all these heroes in one, it's fine to just cut one as well.
Yeah.
Because that, yeah, like seeing this, you can, there's like possibilities of adding too many specializations because Kasai has two, Dorinthia has like four, Olympia has
Yeah.
one.
I
So,
think like, honestly, like Olympia doesn't really fit in a lot of this,
yeah,
or maybe Kasai doesn't. Maybe Kasai doesn't, because like you want to have enough attack actions where every warrior is forced to run some.
yeah. So the reason why I want Olympia in is because Steelblade Shunt is a very good card. And
Mhm.
since warriors are always attacking with their weapons, you want to have alternatives so you can play around Steelblade Shunt so you're not locked into dying at one life.
Yep.
So that's why I want to have Olympia in as well. So because I can probably get cut if you need to. But yeah, this is where I would start with.
Mhm. Yeah. So yeah, well, obviously, like this is super haphazard, but this is like what we basically always start with, which is just like me messaging Oliver, and just like constantly like messaging him and just telling him that his ideas are bad.
Yeah, like I can't put in good deeds go unpunished or good deeds go unnoticed or shitty Christmas present in the queue.
Yeah.
And just like, why? Why not?
Yeah. He wants to
Where
put
else do I
shitty
play
Christmas
them?
present. Oh my god. But yeah, cool. I guess we can just wrap this up by talking about the various draft formats, right?
Yeah.
So, two-player draft cubes. We haven't really talked about actually drafting them. So, there's multiple ways to draft two-player cubes. The way we have it set up right now is that our cubes are all 90 cards, which is pretty divisible by a lot of things, which makes it a little bit easier to figure out draft formats. Right now, we've tested a total of, how much is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different actual draft formats. Quilt draft, Hausman draft, Grid draft, Winston draft, and Solomon draft. We go over the first four in our various videos. I think we're about to put out or have already put out a Solomon draft video for our Guardian box.
Yep.
But every draft format has its different quirks and will produce different types of decks. I guess we'll just go down in order. Quilt draft, for example,
Yeah.
will
Let me find like an example.
yeah
Or we can just
yeah
go. It's time to look through all my YouTubes.
sure.
I don't know what I'm doing. Is it like, how do I get to my profile? uh, whatever. It's fine.
Okay, you're editing this out, right? No.
Let's see. Bento Box. So if you look at, let me mute this. Let's see. We were talking about quilt drafting.
Yeah.
So in this video, you can find it on our channel if it loads.
Okay. So.
Oh,
Yeah, nice meeting.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically what we're doing here is we're arranging everything in a 7x7 grid. It's all public information, and the only things you can draft are things with the short side facing out. So this draft is is Oliver's favorite. It's okay. It's like my second favorite. But basically what it is that it's completely public information, and it's based around either denying your opponent cards or making sure that you're able to draft what the cards you want by offering up alternatives for the opponent. So the decks produced here are pretty variable in quality, but they're always going to be relatively balanced. For example, if you're constantly hate drafting, then your deck's going to be kind of mid, and your opponent's deck's going to be kind of mid. If neither of you are hate drafting, your decks are both going to be pretty good. So it's a good way to, taking the whole cube and, evaluate all your picks. It's a little complicated to set up, so we don't always use this, but it's definitely the one that's been tested the most, the one that's had the most positive reception among people we've played with, just because it's a very interesting format that you don't really get to experience too much.
Yeah, to me it feels like a board game. That's why I really like it.
Yeah, it definitely has a deck builder type feel.
Yep.
We won't go to Hausman or Grid. We're gonna go to Solomon Draft because that's one that's also recently that we did.
Sure. Let me find it.
Yeah.
It's uploaded. It'll be out soon.
Sure. I mean, I assume at this point that it's already out.
Yeah.
So this one we did on TTS, but basically we were playing with 6-card rivers, and if you've played Magic and you know the card Fact or Fiction, it's basically that. Basically, a player will look at 6 cards, arrange them into 2 piles, and then present them to the opponent. The opponent will choose one of those piles to pick first, and then you get the other one. So this one will produce a lot weaker decks because you're always going to err towards the side of having piles that are relatively even in power or interest for you. So it's a good way to test the low power drafts, low power versions of the cube. I personally like it because it's Fact or Fiction. I like Fact or Fiction, but Oliver doesn't, so that's fine.
I want to feel in control.
Mhm.
This doesn't make me feel in control.
Yeah, it's a fun format, but obviously, it's very different, and it does take a while if you like thinking through your decisions. It might take a while for you to finish this draft. But yeah, you just do it 50. You take 6 cards, do it 15 times, and then you've essentially sorted the cube to 2 players.
Yeah, 45 cards each.
Yep. Yeah. So let's talk about Hausman Draft next.
Sure. Make me go back through everything.
Yeah.
Bento.
Yeah, Hausman's pretty fun. It's mostly public information. So we've covered both of the full public information drafts where both players see what everybody else is picking. This one is slightly less public, where you'll have a middle section. We did 3 cards in this video, but since it modified to be 5 cards.
Yeah.
And you have a hand of 5 cards. You make 3 swaps each, alternating, where you swap a card in your hand with a card that's in the middle, and you'll take the rest and then and then burn the rest into a pile.
Yeah.
You'll draft it. Yeah, you do like eight of these hands, so you'll get like 40 cards at the end or so.
Is it 3 swaps each, or is it 3 swaps total?
It's 3 swaps each.
Oh, okay. I wrote in the. Okay, so I wrote it wrong. I'll update it later.
You'll do 3 swaps. The other person will do 3 swaps. But yeah, this one's a little bit more. If you like trash talking, it does facilitate a little bit of trash talking, not as much as the public drafts, but it is. If you like playing with hidden information, this is definitely something to try. The decks made here are usually pretty decent, upper mid in terms of power level generally, just because you have a decent amount of control over what you draft, and your opponent can't hide everything from you. And lastly, we have 2 completely or mostly hidden information drafts. Or I guess we have Grid Draft. Let's talk about Grid Draft.
Sure.
Grid Draft is also public information. I completely forgot about that because we never do it. Grid Draft is the messiest draft. I'm not a fan of Grid Draft, but I know people who are a fan of Grid Draft, and this is basically for them. Basically, you make a 3x3 grid. You take a row or column, and then your opponent takes a row or column. Repeat until most cards have been drafted.
Yeah, until you feel like you have enough cards. I
Yeah.
don't remember what we stopped at, but you take the burn pile and then we reshuffle it and then deal it out again.
Yeah, I think we like reshuffle it twice, and then at the very end, whatever when we have when we can't make another grid is when we stop. I think.
Yeah, it's been a while. We haven't done this one a lot, so
Yeah. But yeah, it's if you want to, it's a very quick draft format. So, if you want to get in games quick, it's pretty good. Generally, these decks will be medium low power because it's going to be relatively unfocused since you're picking up a lot of stray cards that you usually don't want. Um, but yeah, it's a way to get drafts in if you just are short on time.
yep.
And then lastly, we'll talk about Houseman draft. We've done this one second.
Winston.
Oh yeah, sorry, Winston draft. We did this one like second most, right? Let's say.
Yeah, second most for me.
Yeah. So this one is almost all hidden information. You'll make 3 piles of 1 card each. You'll look at the first pile. You'll see if you want it. If you don't want it, you pass, and you look at the next. You add a card to that pile, and then pass to the next pile, and then so on and so forth until you decide to pick a card. If you pass on all 3 piles, you pick a card from the top. Um, yeah, that was a very terrible explanation, honestly.
Just watch
So
a video.
hopefully you can,
Yeah,
hopefully you can read, you can see what we're doing.
Yeah, there's another version of this sort of draft, but all the cards are face up instead, and every time you pick a card from a pile, you add a card from the deck to every other pile, and then refresh the pile. I think we did that version once in person, but it was at the judge conference, so we didn't record it, obviously.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know remember what it was called. It
Yeah.
starts with a W.
This one's fun because it has variable because you have a variable amount of cards that you draft compared to the other player. So you can end up with a very thin pile of cards while your opponent has a very large pile of cards. So number of cards you draft also matters here. Yeah, it's a pretty fun draft format. The only thing I don't like about it is that it doesn't facilitate as much trash talk. Occasionally, you just go like, "Ooh, oh, so suspicious,"
Or
but
like,
it
you
doesn't
left that there?
facilitate as much like talk on the table.
Yeah. I can't believe
But yeah,
you left that there, man. You gave me shield bash. You gave me all the shield bashes. What are you doing?
yeah. This is is this
Look,
Boombox?
no, this is our bento box. This is the
Yeah,
very first time we were
yeah,
testing it.
yeah. Okay, but yeah. So yeah, that's kind of the formats we've tested. There's a couple of other formats that have been done for Magic that we have yet to test for 2-player draft formats. These ones are the ones that's kind of appealed to me the most while I was doing research. But yeah, it's a 2-player draft cubes. They're great. Play them. If you don't like booster drafting, or if you want to play limited and you're like, wow, this fab sucks for limited, you should play these 2-player cubes. I think that a lot of people who don't like traditional limited do end up enjoying these sorts of cubes. Just because decks feel more powerful, you feel more in control of what you get based off the format that you play, and hey, you get to make your constructed level decks in limited, which is always fun.
Yeah, as someone who really hates limited, I really enjoy making these and playing these. So
Yeah, give it a try.
that's my vouch for it.